A city that had invented democracy suddenly found itself ruled by a short list of men who treated law like a private weapon. In 404 BCE, Athens, exhausted, starved, and defeated at the end of the Peloponnesian War, accepted an oligarchic regime imposed under Spartan supervision. History remembers them as the 30 tyrants, but the real drama came after their fall, when Athens faced a question that still haunts societies emerging from civil conflict: should justice heal by forgetting, or cleanse by punishing? From defeat to terror. The 30 did not arrive waving chains, they arrived promising order. Their mandate, at least on paper, was to revise the laws and restore stability after decades of war. In practice, they narrowed citizenship to a list of 3,000 loyalists, disarmed the rest, and governed through intimidation. Executions without trial, confiscations of property, exile, these were not side effects but instruments. What matters legally is not just that the 30 killed, it's how they killed. They hollowed out due process. Magistrates became enforcers. Courts became irrelevant. Even Socrates was ordered to participate in an illegal arrest, an order he famously refused. Terror was bureaucratized. Yet the regime was short-lived. Democratic exiles, led by Thrasybulus, regrouped. Civil war flared inside Attica. By 403 BCE, the oligarchs were defeated, some fled to Eleusis, others were killed. Athens reclaimed its democracy, but not its innocence. Victory creates a trap. Revolutions love revenge. Athens had every reason to indulge it. Thousands had suffered. Property had been seized. Family members had disappeared. The legal tools of the old democracy were available again. The crowd wanted blood. And here the Athenians did something quietly radical. Instead of mass trials, purges, or retroactive justice, the restored democracy proclaimed a sweeping amnesty: let there be no remembering of wrongs. The Greek phrase, monesicakion, was more than poetic. It was legally binding. This amnesty forbade prosecution for acts committed under the oligarchy, with a few narrow exceptions. The leading figures, the 30 themselves, the 11 prison officials, and the 10 who governed Piraeus, were excluded. Everyone else was protected. Athens chose civic survival over moral catharsis. Amnesty is law, not mercy. This is where modern readers often misunderstand the Athenian choice. Amnesty was not framed as forgiveness. It was framed as constitutional necessity. The democracy was fragile. Citizens had fought on both sides. If every collaboration became a crime, the courts would become battlefields. Political identity would replace evidence. The law would be weaponized again, this time by the victors. The amnesty did three things at once. 1. Stabilized the polity by preventing endless retaliation. 2. Reasserted legality after a period of lawlessness. 3. Redefined citizenship as forward-looking rather than punitive. In effect, Athens said, you cannot rebuild a legal order by prosecuting half the city. That decision was astonishingly self-aware. The exceptions, justice still demanded a price. Amnesty was not absolute. The principal architects of terror were still liable. Some were tried. Some were executed. Others remained in exile. These trials mattered symbolically. They drew a legal line between governing badly and destroying the law itself. The 30 were not punished for oligarchy as an idea, but for murder, confiscation, and subversion of due process. One famous case illustrates the tension. In Lysias' speech against Eratosthenes, the orator prosecutes one of the 30 for the murder of his brother. The speech drips with moral outrage, and yet it operates within the narrow legal space left open by the amnesty. Lysias does not argue for reopening the past wholesale. He argues that Eratosthenes falls outside the protection of forgetting. Even in vengeance, Athens insisted on procedural boundaries. The trial that never happened, and why it matters. Perhaps the most telling feature of the post-403 settlement is not the trials we have, but the ones we don't. There was no truth commission. No systematic inquiry into abuses. No public reckoning with collaborators beyond the elite. Memory was privatized. Trauma was real, but politically muted. Was this moral cowardice? Or political wisdom? Here's my opinion: Athens understood something modern states often forget: law is not therapy. Courts can establish responsibility, but they cannot heal a fractured civic identity on their own. The Athenians feared that excessive justice would become injustice by another name. And they were probably right. Within a generation, Athens was politically stable enough to execute Socrates, not a sign of moral health, perhaps, but proof that democracy had regained its confidence, for better or worse. Amnesty versus retribution, a false binary? The Athenian settlement shows that amnesty and retribution are not opposites. They are tools, and their effectiveness depends on timing, scope, and restraint. Total retribution risks perpetual civil war. Total amnesty risks moral rot and denial. Selective accountability, Athens' choice, tries to balance both. The brilliance of the 403 BCE settlement lies in its legal precision. Forgetting was mandatory, but not absolute. Justice was pursued, but not indiscriminately. The law was restored not by avenging the past, but by controlling how the past could be used. That's not forgiveness. That's constitutional engineering. A model with limits. We should not romanticize Athens. Slaves had no protection. Women had no voice. The amnesty protected perpetrators more than victims. Silence was often imposed, not chosen. And yet, as an early experiment in transitional justice, Athens stands shockingly close to modern debates, from South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission to post-dictatorship Latin America. The Athenians asked, what kind of justice keeps the city alive? Not, what kind of justice feels satisfying? That distinction still hurts, and still matters. Why this story still burns? The trials of the 30 tyrants are not really about ancient Athens. They're about the moment after victory, when power could finally punish, and chooses not to, at least not fully. Athens survived because it decided that law must be stronger than memory, and citizenship broader than revenge. It's an uncomfortable lesson. Which is probably why it's endured for 2,400 years.